All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, I'm going to keep it real when it comes to this Terence Crawford, Errol Spence situation. I love Terence Crawford as a fighter. I think that he's phenomenal. I love Errol Spence as a fighter. I think that he's phenomenal as well. But one of them understands the business of boxing and the other one doesn't. Both of them understand the boxing game in the ring, no doubt about it. But one of them clearly understands the business of boxing far better than the other. And that's why when this fight eventually does happen, should it happen, when it eventually does happen, Errol Spence is going to be considered the A side of this fight, and he is going to get the lion's share of the revenue. Because Terence Crawford does not seem to be someone who's able to put his best foot forward when it comes to understanding the importance of controlling his fiduciary future. I think that there's one person standing in between the masses, the boxing quote-unquote followers, viewers, etc., from being able to watch this fight sooner than later, and that's Bob Arum. Interestingly enough, I think that the person who has put Bob Arum or made him a stumbling block in between us being able to see this fight is Terence Crawford himself. I think that Terence Crawford, like many people in their lives, is scared of being too much in control of his own future. I think that Terence Crawford trusts other people to control his future or his destiny more than he trusts himself, at least when it comes to the business aspect of boxing. And that's not a big deal. Sometimes people, sometimes knowing how to delegate things is a better attribute than trying to be a control freak. But it is going to hurt Terence Crawford on the back end because Errol Spence, by the time they do fight, he's going to be far more experienced when it comes to the administrative aspect of boxing. And that's going to result in him making much more money and possibly getting far more fanfare in the buildup of the fight. And that could affect how the judges decide the victor should that bout go 12 rounds. Well, in the aftermath of Terence Crawford's dominating performance against Amir Cotton Candy Chin Khan, Stephen A. Smith, Max Kellerman, and Will Cain all decided that they were going to hypothesize about who they viewed as being the potential winner of an Errol Spence versus Terence Crawford mega bout. So, of course, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
As you hear, both fighters are in the top 5 of ESPN's pound-for-pound rankings, and a potential matchup between the two fighters will be an absolute must-watch event. Welcome back to First Take. We're coming to you live above the river deck at Pier 17, brought to you by Chase. Now, Stephen A., if we got this mega fight, Crawford and Spence, who do you think should be favored?
Right now, I would have to favor Errol Spence. If for no other reason, he's the only person who has fought a real welterweight thus far. Terence Crawford has not fought a real welterweight. And once again, I don't think that he quite grasps how this is going to affect him when it comes to negotiating time. Because by the time they do fight, Errol Spence will have most likely fought and beaten Shawn Porter and either Manny Pacquiao or Keith Thurman. Who is it exactly that Terence Crawford is going to fight in the interim in between this last bout against Amir Khan all the way to the Errol Spence fight? He's going to be fighting B-class fighters or C-class welterweights, and it's not going to look good on him. That's why I tell you brothers all the time, I would love to have Terence Crawford at the very top of my pound-for-pound list. But this dude Lomachenko, in about 15 fights, has fought and beaten bigger names in his 15 fights than Terence Crawford has beaten in his entire career. I'm not quite sure if anybody can dispute that. Other than Gamboa and Victor Postal, who exactly has Terence Crawford beat? Okay, he was able to demolish Amir Khan coming back down from 160 or whatever weight he was trying to fight at when he got his ass wazazaz up by Canelo. I give Terence credit for that. But Amir Khan is not on the level of Kell Brook. He's just not. Kell Brook is a full-grown man. Errol Spence went over to his territory and thoroughly outboxed him and stopped him. I need to see Terence Crawford do something along those lines against a fighter of that caliber. And I think that had Terence Crawford shown more courage economically and in control of his career from that perspective, he would have came over to the Al Haymon side and been able to show exactly what he could do against more high-profile welterweight competition. And by the time you could have built up that Crawford versus Spence bout, they could have split it 50-50. I think that by the time they get there, it's going to be very difficult for Terence Crawford to demand a 50-50 split against Errol Spence. But I see what Bob Arum's doing. He's doing the same thing that he did prior to the Mayweather versus Pacquiao fight, which is have Pacquiao fight B-class competition, but because the media is on Bob Arum's side and also therefore on Manny Pacquiao's side, they're going to act as if Manny Pacquiao is fighting the creme de la creme, the best of the best at every weight class, and they're going to diminish Floyd Mayweather, who fought the most world champions of any fighter in history. And then on top of that, Bob Arum will have Manny Pacquiao fight guys that Floyd Mayweather's already beat get more credit and more glory than Floyd Mayweather got in beating those fighters when they were fresh. And that's how Bob Arum is going to build up Manny Pacquiao's ability to monetize his skills for Bob Arum's sake. He's going to do the same thing to Terence Crawford. And by the time Terence Crawford does get into the ring with Errol Spence, who's about 3 years younger than him, 2 years younger than him, Terence, who knows, he might be at the very end of his prime. He might not have the same potential to defeat an Errol Spence. But by then, once again, Bob will be ready to cash in or cash out on Terence Crawford. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, Terence Crawford's not going to fall for the okie doke, and we can get this fight sometime early next year or the middle of next year, because I believe that Errol Spence is going to fight Sean Porter next, and then maybe Manny Pacquiao or Keith Thurman by the end of this year. We'll see what happens.
Oh, you know, do y'all remember Magic Johnson years ago when he was at the Julio Cesar Chavez?
Nigga, just answer the damn question, man.
Chavez versus Pernell Whitaker fight match, and he was asked
and nothing. Just answer the damn question, man.
Asked to pick between the two, and Magic was like, Pernell is a bad. He said Pernell's my boy, but Chavez is a bad man, but Pernell's my boy. I can't. That's how I almost feel about this. Now I will say this.
As of right now, I would have to give Errol Spence a very slight edge over Terence Crawford in a potential fight, because once again, I've yet to see Terence Crawford against top-notch competition in the welterweight division. By the time they meet, Errol Spence will have beaten most of the top-notch welterweights other than Terence Crawford.
Errol Spence is a natural welterweight. I think he's bigger and stronger, and because of that, he deserves to be the favorite. My hesitancy and my lone hesitancy outside of the greatness of Crawford is the fact that Spence, I thought he should have been able to take out the smaller Mikey Garcia, and he did.
He could have, but he was playing with him. He wanted to punish Garcia over 12 rounds.
So if you couldn't take out Mikey Garcia, I don't think you're going to take out Crawford, which means it's going to come down to a boxing match, and I consider Crawford a superior boxer. But Max, it's a pick-em. I'm going to roll with Spence for the moment.
I would give Crawford the slight pure boxing edge over Errol Spence. But once again, what I saw from Errol Spence against Mikey Garcia, and also Kell Brook to a degree, Errol Spence is a very high-class pure boxer. He just does not get much credit for it because he's known for his power.
I'm going to roll with Spence for the moment by decision.
It's close to a pick-em as you can get. And partly that's because of what we saw Spence do against Mikey Garcia. We already saw Spence go overseas to fight Kell Brook in front of a huge hostile crowd. And Kell Brook, a very good fighter, gave him some rough moments, and Spence came through, and he uses his athletic ability to physically punish his opponent. He applies his skills and his power aggressively. We've seen him do all that stuff, but against Mikey, who's an excellent boxer, but from a smaller weight class, we saw Spence fight an almost technically perfect fight. Southpaw jab and defense, using his reach and size. Mikey couldn't touch him.
And his distance and footwork as well. That was what I was the most impressed by, was Errol Spence's footwork. I've never seen him be able to fight moving backwards like that and side to side, being defensively responsible, so on and so forth, showing head movement, things of that nature. Very impressed.
Spence pitched a shutout. I was actually very impressed and thought...
I agree, so was I.
Thought he went from a Crawford opponent, who's the best available opponent, to about 50-50 in the end.
I never thought that Errol Spence was just going to be an opponent for Terence Crawford. I think that Errol Spence's performance against Mikey Garcia and the wrinkles that he showed, in my view, gave Errol Spence the slight edge over Terence Crawford.
In the end, I take Crawford. You bring up Pernell Whitaker, Stephen A., and that's partly why. Crawford is not only a switch hitter, the best since Marvin Hagler or maybe Mickey Mantle, can fight orthodox or southpaw. He not only has boxing skills, defense, and speed, but punching power, head and body, both hands.
Once again, I like Terence Crawford a lot, but I need to see him proven against a top-notch fighter in his weight division. I give him a lot of credit for the Victor Postal fight. I give him a lot of credit for the Gamboa fight. But I need to see him against someone of a high caliber, of an A-class caliber in his weight class. People will say, what are you talking about? He won all the belts in the 140-pound class. Well, just because you're a champion in a certain division does not mean that you're necessarily an A-class fighter. How many of those fighters can someone name off the top of their head that Terence Crawford beat at 140? It's very, very difficult to do so. Other than Postal, How many fighters can you name at 140 that Terence Crawford beat that you would consider top-notch champions? You have champions and then you have top-notch champions. There's nothing against Crawford, but we also saw this with Bob Arum and Nonito Donaire. Nonito Donaire was someone who was considered a world beater. Max Kellerman at the time, when Donaire was kicking people's asses, was saying that he could defeat Floyd Mayweather if he moved all the way up to 147. And we saw what happened when Donaire got in the ring with a real fighter, a real boxer, in Guillermo Rigondeaux. The same fighter, by the way, who got his ass whooped by Lomachenko. And I don't want to hear any of this nonsense about how Rigondeaux was moving up in weight. If you're going to be considered the top fighter in the world pound for pound, and you get your ass wazazazaz up like that from just moving up one weight class, either you're not as good as people are saying you are, or the fighter that whooped your ass is of a non-pareil skill level, or maybe a little bit of both. Who the hell knows? But either way, just to get back to the point, Donaire was the last fighter who got hyped like this, who was under the Bob Arum banner. And I'm not saying that Terence Crawford is the product of hyping. I'm not saying that at all, because he could do things that Donaire could never do in his wildest dreams. But once again, I would have loved to have seen Terence Crawford sign with Al Heyman. I mean, either you're going to go over to the Al Heyman side or stay on the Bob Arum side and be quiet. Like, stop running on Twitter and Instagram and all these other social media outlets talking about those fighters on the Al Heyman side, because if you really want to fight them, you would have signed with Al Heyman.
Hands forward, backward, side to side. This guy is a complete fighter. But in addition to all that, this is one of the meanest little suckers you'll ever see in a boxing ring. He has a stare like Sonny Liston, Stephen A. He's a bully like that, but he's a bully with character. So when you run into a guy like that who wants to punish you, who's like at the meanness of Crawford, I believe in this fight that will be the difference. And I like Crawford, and it's a tough call, but I like Crawford.
First of all, try to shorten your answer.
Of course you like Crawford, because Crawford is the in-house fighter. He's the ESPN fighter.
Answers when it comes to boxing, because I'm coming to you to ask you more questions. You ain't give me enough time to ask the question. You talked about Kell Brook in England. I didn't see Errol Spence have trouble with Kell Brook in England, but
No, there were some perilous times early on in that fight, Stephen A. Smith. Don't get it twisted. Even Errol Spence stated after the fight that he showed true grit in that bout, meaning what? He had to weather the storm early. Because Kell Brook, that's a big, strong, hard-hitting dude. Kell Brook is just a prime example of an extremely well-schooled fighter who hits hard, has good speed, good heart, in great condition, but he ran into someone who is gifted. Kell Brook is talented, but Errol Spence is gifted. And that's why Errol Spence was able to defeat him in that bout. I would love to see Terence Crawford against someone like a Kell Brook, even though I think that Kell is pretty much damaged goods right now. I would still love to see how Crawford would be able to compete against Kell Brook, just to compare his performance versus Errol Spence. I will pick Terence Crawford to defeat Kell Brook, maybe by stoppage around the same rounds that Errol Spence was able to stop him, somewhere around rounds 9 or 10. But I would love to see if Kell would be able to catch him with anything and how he would respond.
But I will ask you this. When you talked about Errol Spence and what you love technically, it didn't bother you that Mikey Garcia survived those 12 rounds when you consider what Crawford would bring to the table, which I think would be elevated above whatever Mikey Garcia could bring?
Stephen A. Smith, styles make fights. You can't make cross comparisons like that. That's the reason why so many people believed that George Foreman would just totally demolish Muhammad Ali. Because as we all know, Ali struggled with Joe Frazier and Ken Norton, and George Foreman was able to totally just run through and demolish, walk all over both of those fighters. So it's very difficult to make those type of cross comparisons.
I think Spence would have been even more impressive had he stopped Mikey late. But Mikey, after about 6 rounds, he dared to be good on that night, moving up to challenge Spence. But
no, he dared to be great. He tried to be great. Mikey Garcia is a very good to great little man who was going up against a very good to great, much bigger man. And I believe that he thought that from what he had seen by watching some of Errol Spence's previous fights, that Errol Spence was going to be reckless and try to bum rush him early. And that's why I stated prior to the fight that one of the things that Errol would have to watch out for will be Mikey's power early in the bout.
but he didn't dare to be great. After about 6 rounds, Spence convinced Mikey he couldn't win. Mikey was no longer fighting to win, but when you have a highly skilled fighter looking to survive the back half of the fight, tough to take him out. Mikey's a great fighter. He's just not a great welterweight.
Got it. Got it.
So
I got it. I didn't see that because you're saying that he was trying to survive because he knew he couldn't win. That's different. I got it. I got it. That's
Well, Stephen A. Smith, you've been watching boxing for 40 years and you don't know anything about survival mode? Give me a break.
That's
we
what
got you. We got you. You got...
LeBron James knows about survival mode. Survival mode in basketball terms is when a certain star player knows that his team is going to lose. So what he does is he tries to stat pad so that after the series is over, he can say, look, I did my part. I averaged 31, 9, and 9. LeBron James, Russell Westbrook, they know a lot about survival mode as well. In boxing terms, survival mode is when a great fighter just wants to make it through the 12th round so that he can say he did not get knocked out by another great fighter.
By margin and you hate it, you got Spence. You got Crawford. For now. All right.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. We'll see how that fight goes, should it and when it does transpire, hopefully within the next year and a half or so. Once again, I have Errol Spence winning that fight as of right now. But if Terence Crawford were to be able to cement a fight with another top-notch welterweight in between now and fighting Spence and show exactly what his mettle is against someone of a higher caliber in the 147-pound division, then I might change over. We'll see. There's a lot of time in between now and then. So peace.